So earlier today when I was driving, I was thinking about the purpose for this video, and the purpose is to introduce everyone to a very accessible and interesting and profound and short Buddhist text that anyone can benefit from. And this came to mind because I had a recent experience where I was unable to sleep one night, and I often talk about drinking coffee late at night. I claim it doesn't affect me, but it certainly does, which reminds me I'm going to have a sip right now. But I ended up driving out to Chukbok Lake, and on my headphones I had something I just downloaded, and that was a video of a British voice reading a certain translation of the Diamond Sutra, which is one of the key texts in Buddhism for Mahayana Buddhism. And it's one that introduced me to Buddhism many years ago when I was in Korea. I remember I had some friends they were an American couple, and they were teaching and working in Korea just like I was. And they had a thrift sale, and they got rid of some books, including several books on the topic of Buddhism. And I remember just poring over briefly the Diamond Sutra. Of course, in those days when I was living in Korea, I was certainly very vocally evangelical Christian, not so much a universalist in those times, but that's a different story. But anyway, regarding the sutra itself, I believe that anyone can pick it up, even someone who doesn't have any knowledge of the history of Buddhism, someone who has never been to a Buddhist temple or visited a country with a Buddhist population, or someone who doesn't know the Four Noble Truths or any of the the eight rules and precepts. Buddhism is a lot of different lists that you have to memorize. And someone who's never tried meditation or anything like that, you could still read this book just as you would read, say, the Book of Psalms or the Tao Te Ching. Those are also texts that you can read, and it's possible to read them in one setting. The Psalms maybe not. It's quite long, I think. 144, I believe. Some of them are quite long, as opposed to the 84 verses in the Tao Te Ching. That'd be an interesting topic for another video. But anyway, getting back to Diamond Sutra, in addition to, it was 3 a.m. and I woke up and I couldn't sleep, so I got on my bike and I drove to Chukbok Lake, Tranquil Pagoda, and just outside of the pagoda are two Bodhi trees, in fact. And these Bodhi trees are like direct grandchildren of the original Bodhi tree that Siddhartha Gautama sat under to achieve enlightenment. And I've been to these trees at night, but there's a plaque in front of one of them in English that actually pointed out to me, the time of enlightenment, when the Buddha reached enlightenment, was between 3 and 4 in the morning. And that's when I was standing there, and I thought that was such a interesting coincidence. But anyway, I was looking at these two Bodhi trees, which they're taken care of well enough, but there's enough traffic there during the day that I was disgusted to find just garbage, like just right up against the Bodhi trees. And so I took a few moments and picked up just a handful of really disgusting cigarette butts and plastic wrappers and stuff like that. And then I listened to the sutra. And it is a very key, basic sutra for understanding the whole point of Buddhism and what nirvana is, and what the Buddha was actually saying. I mean, it sums up everything quite well. Meaning that it all talks about the concept of non-self, and it talks about the destruction of ego and seeing past the ego, and kindness for kindness' sake. Now, in the study of Buddhism, there's what's called sila, and that's conduct. Those are the precepts, like you shouldn't avoid sexual morality and killing and different intoxicants, things like that, like the 10 Commandments, sort of. And then there's the prajna is the wisdom, but there's samadhi, and samadhi is the practice of meditation. But the Diamond Sutra focuses on prajna, and that's what the Buddha spent most of his life teaching, or in relation to the others, samadhi and sila, he spent most of his time talking prajna. And prajna is a Sanskrit word that means wisdom, the highest wisdom. And the Diamond Sutra, as the Buddha explains later on in the text, he explains that the Diamond Sutra is so named because it's like a diamond in its hardness and its perfection and clarity. And that's the way of looking at it. Like, this is the hardest, most steady, perfect, immovable truth, immutable truth. And it's also beautiful. Throughout it, well, it talks, it's basically the dialogue between Subhuti, and Subhuti is one of Buddha's disciples. And Subhuti asked Buddha, well, what is the fastest way to reach enlightenment? And the Buddha explains that it's through the practice of kindness. It's through goodness. It's through virtue and morality. It's through completely transforming yourself into a being that totally and only and fully expresses kindness. It's expressed in 6 different, I've got it right here. I don't have all of this memorized, but I was thinking about it. The practice of charity. These are called the paramitas. And I've talked about this in an earlier video. And paramita, Sanskrit, it means crossing the river. And just like the Buddha explains that words are only symbols. It's like a raft to get you across the river from earthly consciousness to enlightenment. But he speaks of the paramita of charity, of selfless kindness, of humility and patience, zeal and perseverance, tranquility. And those words, I guess, just sum up, and wisdom, those words sum up basically what you're supposed to do. But without going too far into the technicals, I'll just keep rapping a little bit about my experience and what I've learned from studying the sutra and reading it a few times in the last few days. And I think it really is a good transition from, I was deep into the Course in Miracles, and I was rereading it for a 4th time, the text, but I put that down for a while to refocus a bit more, study some Taoism and Buddhism. And it seems that along with the Tao and with the Holy Spirit spoken of in the Course, the Diamond Sutra speaks of getting rid of the ego entirely and the treasures that are gained from just letting go of yourself. And at the very end, to jump to the very end of the sutra in this translation, which is unlike the translation that I have, which is the Dwight Goddard Buddhist Bible, very old, reliable translation in America, but it's different than the one. I'm not sure what he reads in the one that I'm speaking of, which I will link below. But in the very end, he says, what is this life? Life is just, a bubble in a stream, or it's a flash of lightning. The whole idea is that to speak of ourselves as needing enlightenment or being enlightened ones is to continue to trap us in the idea of self and the idea of others. Well, how do we overcome this idea of self and others? Just like I heard, it was a recent talk on the Course in Miracles, someone was saying, well, you can't just simply go around saying this is all an illusion, because that's that's pretense. That's like telling yourselves things that are not really true, that you can't really work on. But instead you have to work out your own salvation. And that's through things like patience. Patience is difficult. Patience is hard. It sucks to wait in line. We know that ever since we're kids, and they make us wait in line for lunch, It sucks. Like, it's hard to be patient with others, especially when you're having a hard time. To give charity, it's so much easier just to treat ourselves to things. Nobody sees, nobody knows. And these are hard truths, and these are things that I think we know are difficult, but we avoid them anyway, because it's so much easier. It's always waiting for tomorrow. And I'm not saying all this to pontificate. It's just like the more I read this, the more embarrassing it is, kind of. It's like the Diamond Sutra makes you look at yourself and realize that we're caught in this knot of consciousness, of tastes and sounds and flavors and everything, and memories, and we cling to the past, and we cling to the present, we cling to the future, and we're grabbing at these things that aren't really there. And that's what we do with our egos, with our minds the whole time. And really the only way out of it isn't just to go by the pretense of saying, well, this is all unreal, but it's instead to just give ourselves with kindness and to be peaceful and to not exacerbate situations and to help people down and as the Buddha says many times, to share this exact teaching, to share the idea of non-self, to share the idea of, step out from who you are, forget about it, just let things be, and just go with the flow of everything, and just let the universe be as it is, because as soon as we take away the self, and as soon as we take away the desires, we end up with happiness. It reminds me of a cartoon that I saw in Taiwan a few years ago, and it was a man walks up to a Buddhist monk and he says, "I want happiness," and it's in a thought bubble above him, and the monk grabs the thought bubble and he crosses out the "I" and he crosses out the "want," and the monk hands it back to him and says, "There you go." Anyway, just a few thoughts on the Diamond Sutra. Please check the link below to listen for yourself if you've got an hour, or if you just want to put it on before you're going to bed, or if you're doing something else, even just to have it and just to have a taste of a very key text in Buddhism. And as it says, if you only understand one line of it, it will improve your life. It will improve the whole universe more than all the treasures equal to all the grains of sand in the Ganges, or however it's written in the translation that you're listening to. Gosh, anyway, thanks for listening. Peace.